Welcome to the Living After Faith podcast, a podcast designed to help you as you leave religion and move forward with your life. We are the official podcast of RecoveringReligionists.com, a recovery group founded by Dr. Darrell Ray, the author of The God Virus. We welcome your feedback. You can contact us by going to livingafterfaith.com and facebook.com/livingafterfaith and follow us on Twitter at LAFwithme. And now, here's today's program on Living After Faith with Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
And I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
Come laugh with me. Today's program is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. It's an interview that I did with Valerie Tarico, and we'll put some links. She has an excellent YouTube channel. She has a book out that we've highly recommended her book, and we'll put you a link to that too. It's called Trusting Doubt, and Valerie Tarico used to do a program called Moral Politics. Now, right when I was fresh out of church, fresh moved to Seattle, I had already admitted to myself that I was an atheist, but I hadn't really come out to anyone else. And this is about the time I met Deanna.
Yeah, Rich gave me a DVD copy, actually, of this interview, and we just took the audio off of this so you can hear it, because the video itself is not as relevant. It's, just him and Valerie sitting and talking. But I sat and I watched that. I didn't know a whole lot about Rich's story, but we had sat and talked about where he came from over beers. And I was fascinated by this crazy character, this guy I had just met. Like, holy shit, this guy has been through the ringer. And he said, well, I did this interview, and I'll give you a DVD copy. You can watch the video and, learn a little more about me. And so I sat and I think my jaw was on the table the whole time. It's crazy.
Some of the things you'll notice, number one, you'll notice my voice sounds really, really scruffy. That is the state that it was in back then. And I probably had not preached at that point in over a year. So you would think the voice would have recovered a bit and I would sound more like I do now. But when you listen to this, first thing you're going to say is, ooh. It hurts to listen to him. That's because of the screeching, screaming kind of preaching that we did. You'll hear a really damaged voice. You'll also notice people say, I still sound like a preacher. Oh, no. I don't sound at all like a preacher compared to what you're about to hear. So if that freaks you out, sure, you may want to just turn the volume down and pretend you listen to this one and not. But because I don't sound, it freaks me out to listen to it. And another thing, I was not really out of the closet yet at this point. I was an atheist, but I wasn't out of the closet. I, at that point, was very afraid that if I came out as an atheist, that a lot of the things that have happened would happen, that I would lose contact with family members, that people would reject me and things like that. Very specifically, I was concerned that my daughter would disown me, and that has not happened. She loves her daddy, even though her daddy is an atheist. So, but what this subject of this is, it talks about the cult that I was in and how cults attract new members. So as you listen to this, you may not think at first it's relevant to living after faith, but actually it is, because it talks about how cults get people in, how cults lock people in, and in the process of that, it kind of talks towards the end about a little bit of the process of how to start, how to initiate coming out of a cult. So without anything else, this is Moral Politics, hosted by Valerie Tarico.
Good evening. Welcome to Moral Politics. I'm your host, Valerie Tarico, and this is our monthly series, Christianity in the Public Square. Rich Lyons was a smart, young, entrepreneurial go-getter. He was fresh out of school with the world at his feet. Nobody would have guessed that he would spend 20 years of his life in what he now calls a cult, first as a member, and then for the last 10 years as a minister. Today, a communications professional, Mr. Lyons is rebuilding his career. He is here with us tonight to talk about his experience, and in particular to talk to those of us who think that we and our kids are way too smart to ever get sucked in. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Valerie.
How did it happen? How did you go from being this young guy, kind of ready to launch your adult career, to being in what you now consider a cult?
Well, nobody joins a cult, and I certainly didn't set out to. I was wounded. I'd gone through a divorce. I was young and didn't really know a lot about how to get back on my feet, get things together. and came across a group through a girl I was dating that seemed to fill a lot of the needs that I had.
So when you say wounded, you're talking about the divorce, about being hurt.
Exactly. Emotionally wounded. I'd also had a business that was very successful, and then it was buying and selling gold, essentially. The price of gold dropped. I lost everything. So young, and that's what caused the marriage.
And yet you said you were young. You were quite young at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, I was got married at 19, divorced at 21. So this happened between 21 and 22 years old. So you could have kind of picked up the pieces. Heck, most of us haven't even started anything by 21. Exactly.
And yet somehow you got sidetracked.
Well, there was this group, and they just seemed to fit what I needed. They seemed to answer the questions. They filled an emotional void.
So a kind of clarity, you were looking for a set of answers?
I wasn't sure what I was looking for, really. No, I was really looking for acceptance. I was looking to replace the relationships I had when I lost my first wife. All those relationships just disappeared. Much of my life was, tied in with that. So I didn't have a lot of relationships. I was just kind of alone.
And the group offered acceptance.
Exactly. Acceptance. They were totally accepting, very welcoming, and that just kind of sucked me in.
So even though from the outside we look at sometimes the ways that small religious communities make people dress or the rules they have, and yet as a person coming into it, what it felt was warm and like that you were accepted.
Exactly. And I've told you before, and I'll say it, healthy people don't stay. You have to be wounded to a degree that you're willing to overlook things, ignore things, red flags, you don't see them. Because the acceptance or whatever the particular hook is that they've got in your jaw is that appealing to you. You've got this deep, empty need, and they provide the answer, and that is so much what you need that you're willing to ignore the fact that the women aren't allowed to cut their hair or wear makeup or wear pants. It's always dresses. All the men always wear long sleeve shirts, no short sleeves, no short pants, always short hair, no facial hair. I never noticed those things because the acceptance that I was so craving, the validation, was there. And I was willing to overlook that.
It was about community.
Yes.
It was about you, once again, being a part of a community. And it sounds like in this case, not one that you had to build one piece at a time coming out of divorce, but you could just step right in.
Ready-made community and very accepting. And then they began to pull you in tighter.
Tell me what you mean, tighter.
Well, on the outside edge, that's just people who are associated with it. But as you mature, so to speak, as you get closer, they'll let you do different things. You can be an usher, or you can have some active part in the community, but they raise the price, what's required of you to get there. So as you come into the, quote, inner circle, the requirements are more strict. And not just in terms of obeying the rules, but dedication, willingness to give time, sacrifice of your own identity for group identity, those kind of things.
And yet, so when you're talking about those things, I think, oh, well, on the one hand, if you were describing Hare Krishnas or something like that, it would sound worrisome.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you could use the exact same words to describe the church I grew up in, which is a mainline evangelical megachurch, essentially. So, and there are people who would say, you talk about a Christian and a cult. Is that an oxymoron?
They're probably, well, that's a hard thing to say. The group I was associated with, the things that I would say make it a cult. There is the idea, and it's common of Christianity, we're right, you're wrong.
We're
I'm
right,
going to
you're
heaven,
wrong.
you're going to hell. And for our group, it was a very small group that was right. And even within the group itself, you would have issues with the pastor down the street. So our church is saved, their church isn't saved. So it was incredibly exclusive. The more exclusive, the closer it is to a cult. And then you've got individual doctrines, and you've got what I call manipulation and mind control, where in order to control the people for their own good, they use manipulative techniques.
What manipulation? What do you mean?
Well, for instance, when I was pastoring, there was a family that had issues with me because I wasn't fundamental enough. It was in the wintertime, it was cold. They needed about 300 feet of gas line to heat their house because the meter was out on the street, so it was on the side that they would have to pay for. They didn't have any money.
That sounds expensive.
Several $1,000s. I don't remember the exact cost. They came to me. I picked up the phone, one phone call. Less than 12 hours, their home was warm. But I had a hook in their jaw. They owed me. I fed them, but they owed me. And that's what I later found out. And you may not realize it. Some members can live their life in it and not realize that's manipulation. But that's what that is.
So that I do something for you, and then the sense of indebtedness, and it binds you closer to the community.
Right. They lost their voice. They couldn't speak against me because their home was warm because of me. I look back, and there were times I knew. I mean, on that particular one, I knew this will shut them up. There were a lot of things I did that I didn't really think were manipulative, certainly not selfish. I really thought it was for their good. And to understand that perspective, if they're not, quote, living right, they're going to go to hell. So my job as pastor was to help them live right. Sometimes people didn't want to do what I thought that was. So yeah, there were things that along those lines that were manipulative that I regret.
Church, the cult that you were in was Pentecostal.
Yes.
And probably something that people would see as the more conservative end of Pentecostalism because it had the women only wear skirts.
Right.
But it also had other parts, kind of like Sarah Palin's religion with the speaking in tongues, casting out demons, faith healings, prayers that protect against harm. Do you, now that you've come out of it and you look back and you see the manipulation, do you think that manipulation is also in common with mainstream? Do you see it in mainstream evangelical churches or Pentecostal churches? You do?
Yeah. To different degrees, certainly. Just about anything that calls itself Pentecostal, I could probably sit down, watch it for a few services, and make you a list of things they do that are cultic in the way they deal with people.
So cultic, tell me what you mean by that.
They control people, they are exclusive in what they teach, and the weapon they use is community. When they've got you and they can shun you and shut your world down, you know, as you're coming into that inner circle, you've got to reject your friends that you had before you came into the church. You many times have to change jobs because what you do wasn't godly enough. You roll in totally different circles and alienate the people you used to go with. So you become identified with that group. And once they own your identity, they have the power to take that away from you. And it may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but that's powerful.
Well, you know, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. In fact, it seems that, you know, Pentecostals and evangelical Christians are the people who cry the most loudly about cults. It's a way to keep people in line.
I won't say all, but many, many churches, to some degree, use it to keep people, quote, in line. And there are a lot of other techniques.
So when I think of a church like, I'm going to take Mars Hill in Ballard, which is one of our most successful local mega churches, they do things like what they call shepherding, where they take young people in and, offer them a place to live with older church members and basically keep them there until they get married. They have networks set up to provide help to people who need it, financial, kind of like you talked about with the gas line getting put in.
Yeah.
Most people would look at that and say, that's lovely.
And especially the person receiving it. It looks that way. And I can't speak to Mars Hill specifically, but whether you call it shepherding, mentoring, you are shaping that person. You put them in an environment, take them into a home. When I got out of the cult, a divorce, a long story, we don't have time to go into it, but I was offered, a fellow minister offered, he said, come live with me for a year and we'll get you back on track. And essentially what he was saying is, you separated from what the organization believes, spend a year under my foot and I'll whip you back into shape. But that's the same concept, the mentoring.
But wrapped in velvet. Here's a place to live.
Absolutely.
Here's a person who will be there with you when you're alone.
Sure. And you don't have expenses. You can, focus on recovery rather than trying to pay your bills. They paint it into a very warm, this is an opportunity. But you're being
because on one level it is.
Exactly, yes. And that's the way they see it when they're presenting it to you. They don't really see it as, gee, I'm going to get this schmuck and mess his life up. What they see is his life's messed up and I'm going to fix him. And that's
and what he needs is food, he needs a place to live, he needs friendship, and he needs God.
Yes.
Our version, our community.
Yeah,
our
yes, and our particular branch that only 1% of the world belongs to, and the rest of the 99% of the people in the world are wrong and not as smart as we are. But, yeah, so
is it a cult if it's less than 1%, and it's a religion if it's?
Where I would draw the line on a cult is what happens to you when you leave. Because you're not going to know it's a cult until you leave anyway. That may be what causes you to leave, but what happens when you leave? If the letters PTSD become intimate with the way you think, there's a chance that, it was a cult.
So the more traumatic it is, the more costly on an emotional level to leave.
Right.
The more those words, cult, cultic.
The more your mind has been twisted, your emotions. Pentecostalism is intensely emotional. The services, essentially they believe that everyone has to speak in tongues to be saved. And the way that happens, your brain is intelligent. Your subconscious is. You whip up this frenzy of an atmosphere. And then you're putting pressure on them. They know what's expected of them. And eventually the subconscious mind goes on and you're speaking in tongues and you don't know what you're saying. Well, it's because you're clamoring for that acceptance. And I don't get it until I do this. So the pressure is there and your mind responds. Some people, the first time they walk in, some people it's years before they can finally get their brain twisted enough.
That it relaxes control over the flow of sound coming out of their mouths. So let's come back to during that time when you were a minister, did you feel like it was your mission from God to draw other people, to woo other people into the community?
Absolutely.
How did you do that?
We had techniques, various outreaches and things like that, but what we generally did is our line of thinking was people don't need God until they're down, until they're broken. And that's where you would find your people that become your new converts.
So you're watching for people who are vulnerable, who are in a life transition of some kind, who are missing their community.
Exactly.
What?
Divorce. A lot of people come in when they're divorced. Death. When you lose somebody. any kind of life change, even getting married.
So job loss,
marriage,
changing,
sure.
Moving.
Exactly. You find people who are hurt. You bring them.
How do you
church.
find them?
You work with them. They're a neighbor. They're just people that in the church that know folks.
So the whole community is the sales force, essentially. Everybody's got their eyes open?
Oh, we had outreach training. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We would do, one of our favorite tools was a Bible study that takes 12 weeks. You do it in their home, not your home. So for 12 weeks, you come over, you bring dinner, and you sit and talk about the Bible for a few hours at a time.
12 weeks with dinner? Can I sign up?
Well, the thing is, you form a relationship there. You form a bond. And that's the key. That's what they're, and we would even teach that whether or not they're getting it with the Bible study is not the key. Make a friend.
I've heard the term friendship missions.
Yes. There's missionary dating where essentially...
Missionary dating?
Yeah, I was out of the church. The girl that was dating me was in the church. For me to marry her, for her to, for us to get married, I had to get in the church.
And you're saying that was intentional?
Yeah,
I mean, that was kind of part of the plan. She knew all along that she might be able to win you over.
Yes.
And if not, she wouldn't marry you.
Exactly. 8 proposals she turned me down before I finally got it.
People were actually getting paid to be how do you know how to say this? To do friendship missions to foreign students on university campus.
We had friendship groups, which essentially is home, cell group, church. Friendship groups, yeah. And that was the purpose. Make a friend, draw them in.
And then what was your role as the minister in closing the deal?
I was God.
You were God.
Which I say that almost semi-sacrilegiously. In the Pentecostal group, the pastor is the word between the congregation and God. So anything he says, it's as though God said it.
Convicting people from the pulpit, were you the one praying the prayer with them?
Absolutely. You can make words do things. You can affect people. And that was a skill.
And when you were praying, or kind of doing that preaching with the hope of drawing people in your mind to God and to God's community,
sure.
Would you have like specific people in the audience in mind? Were you talking specifically to them, or did you just have ways of talking to the whole group, knowing that it would hit someone, that it would touch someone?
There were times I knew things about people's lives I had no way of knowing. And I could say those things, and it would stun them. And obviously God told me. So it would be very effective in reaching that person.
Interesting.
And I don't believe it's metaphysical now, but at that time, yeah, God was speaking to me. And that's a place, you got to be pretty arrogant to think God is going to speak to me.
But that also must be part of the power of it, right? That you feel so clear that what you're doing is good and right, and that it's God speaking through you.
Sure.
I wish for that kind of confidence.
It's an incredible high. There is nothing like walking up to that pulpit, knowing that these people are living for the moment when you speak. But I don't want to be the one that leads others because I led them wrong. When I realized I was wrong, I tried to fix things, and that's costly.
Do you ever feel guilty about the people you converted?
I did. I don't now because it worked out well enough. Once I realized what was happening, once I realized it was a cult, I started changing and radically changed the way I preached, radically changed the way I did things. And 4 years, it was about 2 years in that, 4 years since then, everyone except the people who were already there, anyone that came in while I was there is out now. Maybe with some degree of wounds like I have, but they're out. And if anything, I was able to get them out. And others too. So it was...
So you have that to redeem the experience, to feel like you were able to set right some of some of what you unintentionally set wrong.
Exactly. And it gave me a perspective, though. These people don't realize they're deceiving. They are deceived. And that's what makes it so dangerous.
Are you talking about the ministers?
Some of the ministers. But the people in the church that are so loving and trying to help people, and on the other hand can be so arrogant and so mean, and they can do things that are absolutely wicked with such glee because they're doing it for God and it's for your own good.
Is this just kind of people who aren't that smart, who don't filter very well?
No, not at all. Jonestown was a spin-off of the Pentecostal church. Jim Jones started as a Pentecostal evangelist. The hundreds of people who drank the Kool-Aid, they weren't idiots, they weren't evil. They were people who, at a broken place in their life, heard a message of hope. And that message resonated so much that it became more important to them than their own life.
Wow.
And they were willing to drink the Kool-Aid. They knew they were drinking. They knew it was death. It was not they weren't tricked. They knew. And I would say that that wasn't the type of group I was. But at any given time, if I had taken that course, 80% of the people would have been close enough that they would have drank the Kool-Aid.
That's a lot of power.
That's way too much power.
People on the outside say it's fake, right? They look at much of what Pentecostal Christians do or other fundamentalist Christians do, and they think no one could possibly be that devoted, no one could possibly believe that stuff. It's put on. And you're saying it's not.
It's not. It's manipulation. It is codependency. There are a lot of clinical terms for what goes on in those places. But it is not fake. People coming out are devastated. They have more mental issues than you can shake a stick at, high suicide rates, PTSD. It's unbelievable what they go through. And essentially no one really is out there to help.
When people get out, it costs them more.
Right. And what you don't realize, it cost you that going in. Those things are the things that died going in. But because they were replaced by the group, you didn't notice it. So it's when you come out and the group shuts it down and totally withdraws that all of the missing things you become aware of.
So you said healthy people get out.
Right.
Could most of us feel confident that we would never get sucked into something like that? Do we need to worry about our kids being the subject of friendship missionaries on campus or, revival meetings?
Kids are a different thing. They're going to follow a group. So I'd be concerned about children. I would watch that. As far as an adult goes, who's a clear-thinking, emotionally stable adult, after a few church services and you see some things and you question some things and you get that we don't question here, it's faith, and you question something else and they say, that's not of God. You kind of get the, okay, that's weird, and you back away. But someone who says, oh, okay, I'm sorry, and just fits in, they're very much at risk. So talk to just a minute or two more about kids, because I think of college, for example, and high school being times of inherent vulnerability, right? When you say where, somebody with a wound or with a transition, well, there's these phases of life that are kind of by definition transitions. All of high school, hardest time of your life. So these groups, they specialize, they are trained to feel that human need. And it's interesting because the group would tell you it's God that does it. But it's when the group withdraws that the loss takes place, or that the loss is recognized. So
what would you say to parents of middle schoolers? I know City Church, for example, is on middle school campuses, on high school campuses, on university campus. Mars Hill is training people to be friendship missionaries on the University of Washington campus. What would you say to parents?
I would urge them to be careful. Know your child. Know what your child is doing. Stay close. Be the relationship. That kid will be healthy if mom and dad are there, being there for the kid, loving the kid, reassuring them, letting them know, I love you. One thing, the Pentecostal and most cults, their God is a mean God. He's looking for you to make a mistake and punish hard. So if you give a different view to your child, the loving parent, the parent who's accepting, okay, you failed, so what? I do too. If you give them that, they won't love the Pentecostal God because he's mean and angry, and they see that. That's not apparent to them. Mm-hmm. But if you put them in a position where to get your attention, they have to act out and get punished, you're setting them up.
Mm-hmm. So stay close. Talk to your kid. Give them an example of what it's like to have a warm, loving parent figure, so they're not attracted to a group, however warm, that offers a harsh, punitive parent figure.
Right. Understand that these people are deceived. Don't hate them. If you know somebody who's in a church like that, love them, especially if they're having church issues, because a friend can make such a difference. And it sounds like I'm preaching their doctrine. Uh-huh. But
we are social animals.
Sure.
We need friends.
Your acceptance can do more to help, telling them they're wrong, teaching, that won't work. There's an emotional connection.
What you're saying is somebody who offers friendship without strings attached.
Exactly.
Without some ulterior goal to proselytize or
Sure.
to sell.
Just be a friend. And that is so powerful to help people who are needing to come out and don't even realize it.
Thank you very much.
That was Moral Politics, hosted by Valerie Tarico. It was produced by Bill Alford.
And it was done at Scan Studios. Our good friends at Ask an Atheist, they started as a cable access show at Scan Studios, and Scan has gone away. But we hope you enjoyed a little bit of a flashback episode.
Yeah, that was recorded on February 13th, 2009, so definitely a while ago. A couple, 2.5 years ago, actually.
I sounded pretty bad.
You sounded pretty scratched up, that's for sure.
I hope I sound better now. I'm Rich Lyons.
And I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
Come laugh with me.
Thank you for listening to the Living After Faith podcast with Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons. Living After Faith is a podcast designed to help you as you leave religion and move forward with your life. We are the official podcast of RecoveringReligionists.com, a recovery group founded by Dr. Darrell Ray, the author of The God Virus. The music for this show is provided by Morrison's Prophecy. See livingafterfaith.com for a link to more music from Morrison's Prophecy. We welcome your feedback, and you can find phone numbers and email addresses at livingafterfaith.com, at facebook.com/livingafterfaith, and follow us on Twitter at LAF with me.